And welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss best practices with virtualization and data center consolidation strategies in the federal government. With me today on the show are Mike Mestrovich, the Senior Technology Officer for Solutions, Directorate for Information Management, and Chief Information Officer, Defense Intelligence Agency. Cindy Cassil, the Director of Systems Integration in the Office of the Chief Information Officer, Department of State. Cheryl Rogers, the Director of the Office of IT Optimization in the Office of the Assistant Administrator for Information Services and Chief Information Officer at FAA. Dmitry, Kagansky, the Chief Technology Officer, Quest Software Public Sector. Gunnar Hellekson, the Chief Technology Strategist at Red Hat U.S. Public Sector. And Steve Peacock-Unisys Corporation, VP Infrastructure and Cloud Computing. Let's get right into the discussion. Let's start with Cindy. Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about your role with virtualization and data center consolidation at the Department of State?
Well, good afternoon, Jim. Well, first of all, I have several responsibilities as the Director for Systems and Integration, but chief among them is our data center consolidation and our data center operations. We are in the process of consolidating data centers. We've been doing that since 2007. And we are also working on our strategy on where we place our data centers in the United States, and virtualizing everything into those data centers right now.
Yeah, cool. That's, I know it's a really, really hot topic. I mean, we've been talking data center consolidation. I kind of like find it interesting to watch technology evolution. I mean, we had everything was like centralized and everything moved out to regionalized. Now everything's coming back to be centralized again. It's like a swinging pendulum.
It is.
Mike Mestrovich, how about over at DIA? What are some of, what's your role with data center consolidation and virtualization?
Sure, good afternoon. So about 2 years ago, the IT department over at DIA launched a massive IT restructuring effort to kind of bring the agency forward, understanding there were going to be some massive budget shortfalls here in the impending future. So my responsibility involves taking about 16 different infrastructure restructuring programs and managing those activities. Those include data center consolidation. We've just stood up our first enterprise service delivery center. Mm-hmm. Email consolidation. We're consolidating about 15 different regional email systems down into one. And then we have efforts underway with desktop virtualization, application virtualization, and then we're actually re-architecting the remote offices. That is, how do we support our remote customers at about 200-odd countries throughout the world?
Yeah, terrific. And we'll drill down on some of those to hear about some of the benefits you expect to come out of some of these efforts. Gunnar Hellekson over at Red Hat, can you tell us a little bit about what role would a company like Red Hat play in supporting the government and helping them move forward on these efforts?
Yeah, sure. So Red Hat's an open source company, and it turns out that open source is a huge driver for the adoption of virtualization and a lot of the other enabling technologies that bring not just infrastructure as a service, but also platform as a service and software as a service. So we've actually had the privilege, especially in the position as people mostly know us as an operating system provider, and it turns out operating systems are everywhere, especially everywhere you have virtualization.
Right.
And so we've actually had a great opportunity to see where all of these infrastructure projects are happening over at DIA and FAA and state and so on. The ability for open source to actually commoditize a lot of this technology and make it broadly available has actually made it really exciting for us to
yeah, I
be
bet.
involved.
I mean, open source over the years has slowly been, becoming a higher and higher priority, and with all the mobile devices now, with downloading open source apps and everything else is becoming the way to go for a lot of folks. Steve Peacock at Unisys Corporation, can you tell us a little bit about your role and how Unisys is positioned to help the government move forward in these areas?
Sure. So my role is primarily in infrastructure optimization and cloud computing. And of course, Unisys has a portfolio of software, services, and technologies. Last number of years, we've been heavily engaged with virtualization consolidation across a number of the public sector and government and in the private sector, so we get the opportunity to look at the best practices in all of those areas. So we've gone through all the wars with virtualization, all the politics and the challenges. As a systems integrator, I like to say we see the good, the bad, and the ugly with our customers because we often have to solve a lot of the same problems that they have. So we see the transitions very early. We see the new technologies, and we try to apply them to our customers And so we see what other people are doing, and most often we're able to share with our customers what other departments are doing at the same time, and they learn from that.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. I think government needs to do that, to look where there are best practices and success stories and try to emulate
Sure.
that and share it. And you really have politics and culture issues and working with
you
the
know what?
government? Geez, I mean, I don't think...
I've had 15, almost 20 years of federal, and I've never really run into anything really tough.
Yeah, I mean, I was CIO Treasury, I had all those bureaus, and I would
Yeah.
just say, hey, let's do this, and everybody would say, oh boy, yeah, sure, of course, we'll do it.
Learning how to share, things like that.
Cheryl Rogers, how about the FAA? Tell us a little bit about your role there on data center consolidation and virtualization.
Sure, Jim. My role is really around IT optimization across the FAA enterprise,
Okay.
across all of our business units. So one of the key things that we're doing in the FAA that I'm leading is something around cost control, trying to put in those initiatives across the FAA where we can achieve savings and then use that savings to move more into the strategic direction of FAA. And certainly key among those is server virtualization as well as data center consolidation. So my office leads those particular two cost savings initiatives.
Yeah, I think cost savings with the budget climate and the budget wars going on and the budget climate for the future looking pretty tight. I think there's going to be a real challenge on everyone on how can we get more capabilities, better efficiencies, while at the same time reducing our O&M costs and baseline costs. It's a real challenge, and hopefully with technology there could be some answers there. Dmitry, Quest software. Tell us a little bit about how does Quest fit into this virtualization and data center consolidation world?
Right. So Quest Software is a systems management company, and my role there is actually to make sure that the software that we put out actually meets the public sector needs as well. So my job is really to straddle a line between what our customers want, what our product people and developers deliver, making sure that we can help organizations actually move faster and get efficiencies out of the systems that they have. And around data center consolidation and virtualization, we really have tools to optimize, to put in efficiencies, and to help people migrate to those sorts of platforms. So if they have a physical machine, we have the actual tools themselves to move them into a virtual environment.
Terrific, thanks. All right, well, if we're going to do this data center consolidation, virtualization, obviously there has to be some benefits. There's got to be some reasons why we're doing it and some driving forces. Let's start this time with Cheryl at FAA. What are some of the key benefits you expect to achieve as we move forward and you realize what the goals you're trying to achieve here?
Well, there's a couple of quick things that come to mind, and certainly in my introduction, cost control is one of those. We certainly have seen in the agency some of the efforts that we've had around virtualization the last several years. We've shut down many servers. We've moved those into the data center, into a virtualized environment, and this has really resulted in a lot of cost savings. We've been able to defer cost, look when we get ready to stand up a new business solution, we virtualize it on existing servers. So this has been a tremendous cost savings benefit to the FAA, and we've been at this about 3 or 4 years, and we have a good track record thus far in virtualization. In the area of data center consolidation, certainly it's kind of along the same line. We hope to achieve greater savings. We also hope to improve our standardization and our security of our overall operation.
Yeah, I know that there are tremendous savings on the table there, but with data centers, I think some people think, well, that's not hard. We just move into another one, but there are a lot of complexities along the way too, and we'll talk a little bit later on in the show about some of the difficult parts of doing it. Let's go to Cindy. Cindy, what do you think? What are some of the key benefits you see coming out of your efforts?
Well, when we started our data center consolidation, we first did a business case analysis to determine what the benefits were. One of the things we discovered is that we had 77,000 square feet of office space that had been repurposed as data center space around the DC area. So we have, in our business case analysis, if we configure our servers properly and do virtualization, we think we can reduce that down to about 10,000 square feet
Wow.
of computing space. So giving the space back to the business is a key driver for us in the State Department. So that's been very successful. And then also, we're looking at the efficiencies for our power consumption. Power consumption is a big deal. We didn't monitor our power before we started consolidation, and now we've put monitoring capabilities into effect. And so we can measure that and then try to improve on it as we go through this.
Yeah, a little green
consolidation.
IT. We've done shows on that too, and
Exactly.
the savings that are there. It's amazing when you just make something a priority, the amount of opportunities there are to achieve different types of savings. Mike Mestrovich, let's talk DIA. What are some of the key benefits you expect to achieve as you go forward with your plans?
Well, I think like most organizations, we see data center consolidation and virtualization as kind of key efficiency drivers. As I think most people are aware, moving our facilities to a smaller number of data centers certainly helps in that efficiencies model. We have, I believe, around 14 different major data centers today. We're looking to neck that down to about 4 here over the next couple of years. So obviously, when we go ahead and spread our IT resources and investment dollars in the outgoing years, we're spreading those over a smaller number of data centers. Those data centers also are new and improved data centers in the sense that they're built to green standards. We have hot aisle containment, so we're not cooling the entire data center. We're just cooling the actual equipment, so that saves on the efficiencies from power and cooling and so on and so forth. However, beyond the efficiency drivers from a cost containment perspective, we're looking at the efficiencies enabled by virtualization, and so by that, we can increase services as mission needs dictate. So as you can see, obviously, in the past few months, we've had a number of different mission imperatives pop up throughout the world. Well, in the new environment with virtualization, we can increase mission capabilities dramatically at the push of a button. And so we can spin up new servers to host more geospatial applications to cover contingencies around the world without physically having to go provision those servers. So that's one of the major enablements for us.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I know I make this point quite often in the radio show as the next generation of IT leaders and employees enter the workforce. They're used to downloading apps on their iPhones and their Androids and their Blackberries and whatever. They're going to expect that kind of quickness and agility to quickly spin something up, make it work. Dmitry, what do you think in terms of when you look at not necessarily benefits to Quest, but what benefits do you see to the government moving in the direction of virtualization and data center consolidation?
I actually think the biggest improvements are going to be around the management of these systems. The fact that you consolidate everything means that you can have everything much easier to manage, all within reach. And the fact that everything's more contained lets you be able to manage, monitor, and deploy them out as needed and collapse back all of these different systems, but keep it all in a compact environment. It also makes them more portable. So when you look at something like DIA, where they're trying to have multiple mission support going on, they can actually take these packages that they put together, use them on another mission. So there's reuse there as well.
Yeah, that's another advantage. I guess that's not quite so obvious as the reuse capability, which can work across government. Steve Peacock, how about Unisys? What is your vision, and what do you see as some of the big benefits that can come out of these efforts for the government?
Well, I think virtualization it was just the beginning. It was a very big transformational activity for us. I think it's actually more of a cost adjustment because we got really happy with deploying hardware easily. Hardware was cheap, but floor space went up and energy costs went up, and that got our attention right away.
Good point.
So that drove it. So I sort of think like it's a market adjustment. So our customers our government customers and their customers may be very happy right now, but they'll be complaining about IT costs again in a few years.
Right.
And then we're going to have to focus on these disruptive technologies, like you mentioned, mobile technologies, rapid responses. And what we've done is we've deployed virtualization in many of my clients, whether it's a very large strategic deployment like the Department of State did, or whether they're doing it as they can get refresh money, as they can get budgeting and funding. They're going along and they're deploying the technology, but they're not changing all the operations and the processes and the SLAs and the policies along with that. They're getting the benefit, which they should, right away. So the next sort of stage is to go into that process change, sort of sew everything back together so that we can take a step forward and start deploying things. As you said, the management tools area is going to be a huge area for our focus in the next couple of years as we really start exercising these things we've done. Virtualizing workloads into containers is going to change the way we do business. Provisioning things more rapidly is going to change it. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Still, who knows what new technologies will come out. Cloud computing's in there.
Right.
But virtualization, I think, was just sort of the cost adjustment that we needed to make to get there.
Yeah, terrific. That's a great way to lay that out, too. And in fact, we're going to talk cloud today because, sometimes, to me, when you look at data center consolidation, cloud and private private clouds and public clouds and managed services and all that, the issues get to be somewhat confused in different ways as to what goes where, kind of thing. But Gunnar, what do you think at Red Hat? What are some of the big advantages you think the government will see by moving in this direction?
Yeah, sure, and I agree completely with Steve and Dmitry that the consolidation is just kind of the first step, and it's actually the better management, which is absolutely necessary once you're virtualizing, the better visibility you get on your infrastructure once you've virtualized it, because virtual servers can't hide. And once you've identified all of your assets and virtualized most of those assets, you suddenly start noticing redundancies that maybe had been hidden from you before, right? Suddenly, why do I have these 4 messaging systems? Why do I have these 8 different web server platforms, that kind of thing? So there's actually, virtualizing your infrastructure actually becomes a forcing function for improving sharing and collaboration inside the infrastructure, which I think is kind of exciting and actually contains the potential for even more cost savings than even just simple virtualization.
Wow. I mean, I'm getting excited just listening to the conversation. I'm thinking you're bringing up all these things that I guess are, I haven't thought about, but sounds like all kinds of advantages coming down the road. Let's talk cloud. Since you brought up cloud, I think we should talk a little bit about how cloud fits into this, because I see some agencies buying data centers and consolidating into those, while others are saying, no, we don't want to do that. We just want to push all our stuff out to some cloud provider and let them, lease it back to us as a service, or we'll pay by the drink kind of thing. And it gets confusing to me sometimes of private clouds, public clouds, data center consolidation. Someone once said, maybe the government could do something with reducing the deficit if they just sold all their data centers to the private sector and let them lease them back over time. Now, they'll pay for them eventually, but boy, that would be a nice hit for improving the short-term deficit anyway. But what do you think? Mike, how do you, Mestrovich-DIA, how does cloud fit into this whole picture for you?
So we have a number of different capabilities right now with regards to cloud. As I mentioned, we've moved to our first enterprise service delivery center, our first enterprise data center. Unlike, I think, a lot of agencies, we struggle with the fact that we have, within the intelligence community, multiple classifications of networks throughout the agency. So, for example, the classification of NSA's network is slightly different than the classification of ours. And so, conceivably, putting all of the IC data at one giant IC data center, there are still some security hurdles that need to be overcome. Those are relatively policy issues, not necessarily technical issues.
Right.
That being the case, we have launched what we call the Quad Initiative, and it's an initiative between NRO, NGA, DIA, and NSA to collapse as much as possible our IT infrastructures and enable that type of cloud offering. And so by that, what we have is the opportunity for customers at DIA who need geospatial applications to natively be able to go into NGA data centers and be able to utilize those offerings as they exist at NGA data centers, not necessarily for DIA to have to take the data and the actual software and bring that up in our data center or our environment. Likewise, the same holds true for NSA. Now we have the opportunity for customers to be able to utilize NSA applications and data sets natively as they exist in that NSA environment without us having to repurpose that in our own DIA environment. And so that's part of the Quad effort, and that's something we're driving towards over the course of the next year.
Great. I mean, to hear the intelligence community working to coordinate things is a real refreshing step. As I know, it's been a challenge. I spent 18 years at Secret Service working with the intelligence community and know some of the unique issues that are involved with trying to move forward. But it's exciting to hear that. I want to hear from everyone else, too, about a little bit about cloud here. But first, we got to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Mike Mestrovich from DIA, Cindy Cassil from Department of State, Cheryl Rogers from FAA, Dmitry Kagansky from Quest Software, Gunnar Hellekson from Red Hat U.S. Public Sector, and Steve Peacock from Unisys. We're talking data center consolidation, virtualization. When we went to break, we were talking about how does the cloud strategies fit into this overall picture. Let's go to Cheryl Rogers-FAA. Cheryl, how does cloud fit into this overall picture for you?
Well, cloud computing is definitely a part of FAA's data center consolidation strategy. As we go about looking at our every data center, every server room space that we have in the FAA, we're looking to see exactly what resides in those facilities. And we're also looking at those in terms of how we could adopt cloud maybe as a potential solution for those services. And so as we all know, there's a lot of things you have to consider when you think about the cloud environment. But bottom line, at the FAA, we certainly believe that there's a there's a need for our use of public and private cloud computing, especially where we could get infrastructure as a service or software as a service. And so we've already awarded a cloud contract to a provider in late 2010, and we're in the midst of already relocating some of our server room facilities to that location, and we're running cloud pilots right now.
Oh, wow, cool.
And hoping to take advantage of the lessons learned from those that we can apply across the
Right.
rest
Now,
of the
will that be a
agency.
location that is owned by the provider, or is that a FAA location?
It will be a commercial provider.
Okay.
We've already taken some steps also inside the FAA, recognizing that the nature of our business, that some of the services we provide will need to be retained probably inside the walls of the FAA. So we're also looking at how we put in private clouds inside the FAA-owned data centers.
Because we've had a show about cloud and private public. We had DISA talking about how they view themselves as providing a private cloud to the other military entities and so forth, whereas others are just pushing stuff out and saying, give it back to me on an SLA and provide it to me as a service. So it's interesting watching that process unfold. Cindy Cassil, how about over at State? How does cloud fit into your picture?
Well, we're planning for both public and private cloud computing within the Department of State. First of all, most of our computing is in the private cloud at this point, but we are moving several things to the public cloud this year. But one key thing that we're really focused on right now is the CIO has said we really need to have governance and policy on how we move our applications and our IT to the cloud. So I think she's really concerned, and it's a valid point, that we've done all this work to consolidate our IT, so we need to make sure that as the cloud becomes so available to our IT customers and users, that we don't have our IT disparate again like we
Right.
did under, the server.
Right. When
that we
everybody
had.
was pushing everything out and then
Absolutely.
you lost control.
And now we're trying to pull it back in, and we don't want to lose that control again. So we're trying to govern that and put that policy around it to make sure that doesn't happen in the future.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
because I know we went through that craze of, end user computing, push everything out, then all of a sudden you lost control over what we had and who was doing what,
Right.
and version control and change control and all those good things.
And so, we're really putting stuff in the user's hands. I mean, customers have the ability to go out and get cloud services right now, so we really need to make sure that we have something to govern that by so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, good point. Governance process needs to be in place first to make sure it goes smoothly. Gunnar, how about that Red Hat? How's cloud fit in? Is cloud a good thing for open source?
Cloud's a fantastic thing for open source.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, you think so? Yeah, I thought. Yeah, that shouldn't be a surprise. So, I mean, the open source has been, like I said earlier, it's been a huge driver for these cloud deployments. You got Rackspace, Google, they're all standardized on open source platforms
Right.
for providing these cloud services. But it's interesting to hear the government folks at this table talk about cloud computing and for good reasons. What they're mostly concerned with is these infrastructure as a service, and that's because infrastructure as a service is really easy to understand, and it's really easy to actually implement. Right? Take a machine, put it in a virtual box, and then go put it on somebody else's host. I think the really interesting cloud work that's going to happen is going to be around platform as a service, where we start refactoring our applications to take advantage of different layers of abstraction, if you like. So if I can take an application and host it on a Java container, and I don't even care what that Java container runs on, as long as it's a Java container that meets my SLA, that's great. When I have conversations with application developers in government and the contractors, they'll often come to me and say, well, we're writing this new application, how do we make sure it's cloud ready? And which is a terrifying question, right?
Right.
We're only just now figuring out the policies of how to put whole virtual machines up there.
Sure.
And so I think the conclusion a lot of people are coming to is the use of open standards to ensure interoperability, to ensure to ensure a level playing field, to ensure you don't get locked into a particular cloud implementation.
Right.
And all of that is very well supported by open source implementations. So.
Yeah, I think it's going to be real interesting to watch the evolution, because some of the things moving to cloud are relatively straightforward. I mean, I think email as a service is fairly straightforward and so forth. But as you begin moving along, and if in reality you're doing this where you're truly purchasing a result as opposed to products and services, then what equipment and what devices are used by the cloud provider really become irrelevant to the customer if you get to that point. Yes. But I think there's a lot of government agencies are going to be very, very careful as they move in that direction, as well as the vendor community is going to be lobbying in pretty hard and digging in for their positioning on all this too.
Commoditization is scary. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Steve Peacock at Unisys, how do you see cloud fitting
Well,
into the picture here?
You mentioned evolution, and I think that it's really going to change in the next couple of years. And what we see is our clients, which have been very focused on the infrastructure, now starting to look at the applications themselves and saying, okay, we understand IaaS and how we're going to do that. They are seeing that they're looking at different choices for resources. So they can put it on a dedicated server, they can have a virtualized server, they can have a highly automated virtualization, they can build a private cloud on-premise, they can lease a private cloud off-premise, go to community clouds, various federal government clouds. Essentially, they're going to have lots of choices as to where to put these workloads in the future. And the challenge is going to be is how do you manage across all those different resources like it's one? Because otherwise, we have fear, we have lose control, we have safety issues and security issues. So we at Unisys have seen this transition. A lot of our customers are starting to sort of change their focus from looking at the infrastructure now to looking at the applications, looking at infrastructure more strategically across those different, call them silos or different types of resources, and paying particular attention at the way that they manage those. So that's the three strategies we look at: applications, the strategic way that you design infrastructures, and your management systems for the future. And that's we think if you concentrate on those three areas, that's you're going to be a successful deployer in the end.
Yeah, very good. And hopefully we'll have some time to discuss a little bit about that security question, because I know that's a big one out there on all these approaches. Dmitry, what do you think from the Quest viewpoint? What do you see? How does cloud fit into this whole picture?
So there's two things that we're seeing that's become really interesting to us. One, to springboard off what Steve said, is just the whole management aspect, that we're actually getting a lot more inquiries about our solutions for monitoring, and no longer just monitoring systems or even apps, but behavior of those virtual machines, how they interact with one another, which is another layer that you have to keep tabs on that you didn't have to before. There's also more of a concern of what the end user experience is. In the past, it was much easier to troubleshoot problems and where people are having bottlenecks. There's that additional layer that now makes it much more difficult to find where the problems are. So obviously, on the Quest side of things, as I said, we're getting a lot more interest on that side. On the cloud side, as far as a migration strategy goes, we have the tools to help people move into a cloud infrastructure, whether it's public or private, and provide that private infrastructure if they need it. But one of the things that I think you're going to start to see happening is and we haven't seen this yet, but people haven't started talking about an exit strategy or plan B. What happens when you start making a move into the cloud and things go wrong, or you decide you don't want to do it, or you want to go to another vendor? How do you move around? There's standards, obviously, but a lot of them are still being formed. So how do you go from one vendor to another? Or what happens if that vendor can no longer provide the services that you need, or you need something additional? And I think that's going to be a big concern over the next 6 to 12 months that people haven't considered yet.
Yeah, that's a very good point. As if you push things out and you be back offered back as a service, then when it's time to recompete and other companies are competing against them, that whole change control process will become a big factor to be dealt with. All right, well, we've been talking about benefits and strategies. Let's talk about the hard things, the challenges, the problems, the things that are hard to do, things that sort of like get in the way every day that you're trying to overcome. Let's start with Cindy again. Cindy, what are some of the big challenges that you think need to be still overcome to get where you plan to go?
Well, from a virtualization standpoint, it's become such a popular thing in the marketplace that it's very hard to get the talent pool is very small. It's very hard to get good engineers.
That's a good point.
We have some great engineers, but we need more, and it's very hard to find those engineers. Also, as far as virtualization is concerned, when we have all of our customers want to come into our data center, they want to consolidate, but we have a little trouble with them wanting to virtualize. They still think that they need to have a physical server to run their applications. So that's a little bit of a challenge, convincing our customers that virtualization is a good thing and that their applications will run fine on them. So.
Yeah, I can understand that. Having been there and done that, I know what it's like to sit around the table with 10 folks with 10 different opinions on what's the best thing to do and trying to figure out a common way to move forward. Mike Mestrovich, what do you think? What are some of when you go to work every day, what are some of the real problem areas you need to address and challenges you have to overcome to get where you ultimately hope to get?
Well, I think we have three major challenges in the area, and I agree with Cindy right off the bat that the number one challenge is training. I mean, the technology is relatively new. It's sound technology, but getting the skill sets that understand that technology and have actually done some of these things on a large scale, that's a small pool of people. In our environment in the intelligence community, when you couple that with the requirement to need a clearance in order to work on that,
Right.
that makes that pool of talent
Sure.
even smaller. So training and talent is certainly the number one challenge that we have. And the training component also is a factor for government individuals. I mean, we need to train our government staff as well and bring them up to speed on these new technologies and then keep them trained. The second major challenge is financial, and realistically, we're in an era of declining budgets. I don't think anybody doubts that. But unlike the corporate world, we don't have an opportunity to go out and increase revenues next year. We
Right.
don't have an opportunity to borrow and,
Sure.
and leverage
Sure.
additional resources. So with regards to budget, we really have to take a hard look internally at the missions that we're running today, and we have to either stop doing some things or take some more risks in what we're doing to free up that working capital to go ahead and make the investments in this. And we have to sync that up in such a time frame that the new technology comes online so that we can migrate over to it so that then those mission risks that we were potentially taking are obviated by moving to that new technology. And then the third one is organizational. I think it was mentioned earlier. I mean, how do we adapt the new organization to take advantage of the technology that we're bringing to bear? I think technology itself is great, but unless the organization adapts itself to take advantage of the technology, then what's really the point of implementing it? And so in our environment, there may be many different divisions or organizational functions that go away because the technology now does that.
Right.
And we have to restructure ourselves and re-educate our folks to take advantage of those technological changes.
Yeah, and that issue comes up almost every radio show we do, is the issue of people change to mirror the changes that are happening with technology. And you're exactly right about the financial challenges. I think they're going to be there. And I think sometimes what people don't understand is there's oftentimes strong return on investments and business cases to be laid out, but sometimes it takes some money up front to make the investment to achieve those savings. And when you don't have that upfront investment, it makes it very, very difficult. You got to be awfully creative and innovative to figure out ways to front those upfront investments. Cheryl Rogers, how about over FAA? What are some of the big problem area or challenges when you get what's in the way preventing you from getting where you want to go as fast as you want to get there?
Well, I agree with what Cindy and Michael said, for sure. I'd like to add one other challenge that we've seen, and it kind of goes in line a little bit with the organizational issue. You know, it's a cultural change to a large degree, and I don't think it's any surprise that a lot of the federal agencies, we run in a federated type of model where several of the business units, especially the larger ones, they own a lot of their IT, they own their own boxes, and so we in the CIO office, we're continually trying to figure out ways to demonstrate that we can add value by consolidation. And this is true whether it's shared service, whether it's data center consolidation, virtualization, or just any type of shared
Sure.
service type of activity. So really kind of trying to resolve how that they can know that they're going to get the service they need from data center consolidation that they once had before, although they don't have necessarily 100% control. I do think that we can resolve that, and I certainly, whether it's commercially services provided through the commercial sector or internally, where you can have service level agreements and monitor and track performance and those kind of things. The other challenge that I'm spotting around data center consolidation, and I don't think this is unique to the FAA, we still have a lot of systems that really were designed and architected around, you know, for a decentralized environment. And so you can't just automatically, you know, just
Right.
yank those things
Right.
up and just throw them into the cloud, like,
Right.
you know. So it's real
Sure.
easy to say, just move to the cloud and do it quick, you know.
Right.
But we really got to take a good assessment of those applications and really look at them, because there could be integration issues, there could be all sorts of things that we need to resolve. So I think looking at those and communicating why it may be taking us a little longer than normal is a real important part of the CIO office's
I hear
job.
you, and I agree. I mean, I think, you know, to talk about these things is real easy, and intuitively it looks like, oh, okay, big deal. But when you actually start getting into the complexities, they're
not
not
easy.
easy issues.
It's
There's a
not
lot of
easy.
issues there that need to be
Yeah.
addressed.
I think one of the things on cloud, when we first started talking about it a few years ago, it almost had this notion of it's just magic, just throw it out there. But
Yeah,
there
just
is
hire
nothing
somebody and say,
magic
here, take
about
all my
this.
stuff out and we'll continue to go. But you're right. And there's contractual issues and procurement issues and the culture issue you mentioned and changing business processes. There's a lot behind it. Cindy, do you have a comment on that?
I was just going to comment that as we've done our data center consolidation, we've done something what we call our CST, our customer transition plans and our system transition plans, just because of that very reason. We realize that the systems need their transition plan, plus the customers need their transition plans, so that they understand exactly what has to be in the data center already before you move their system in, like infrastructure for that system, and also, the communication with the customer,
Right.
so they know exactly what's happening. But
Yeah,
that's
good
worked very
points.
well for us.
Good points. Gunnar Hellekson over at Red Hat, what do you think are some of the big challenges that need to be overcome to get to where folks are trying to go?
Yeah, so I think we've talked about a lot of them, and I think though Mike hit on the biggest problem, which was the organizational changes. Henry Sienkiewicz over at DISA talks about his race cloud, and he's got this great story
Right.
about having he insisted on having people being able to provision systems with their P card, right?
Right.
So give them a credit card, and just like Amazon, I'll be able to get a machine stood up. And in DISA's case, it took them 3 days, and it wasn't technically they could provision the machine in 5 minutes, but it took 3 days to move the money around before the customer could get their machine. This is the state of cloud at DISA, right?
Right.
It was in fact a leader, and one of the first clouds stood up in government. And so I think the changes to procurement necessitated by a lot of these cloud deployments is a challenge, first of all, to get these procurement rules changed. But
Right.
once changed, they actually present a great opportunity, because we'll actually introduce a lot more flexibility into the way that we purchase services and the way that we provide services between agencies.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's the great points on the procurement and acquisition folks who are going to have to think about buying a lot different. You really want to purchase a result as opposed to a device or a service or whatever you're looking for. I want, a result. The result's going to be I have, my emails available to me 100% of the time and on site, whatever, and however you deliver that result, you figure it out. So it does change the thing. I want to hear from Steve and Dmitry too, but before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Mike Mestrovich from DIA, Cindy Cassil from Department of State, Cheryl Rogers from FAA, Dmitry Kagansky from Quest Software, Gunnar Hellekson from Red Hat, and Steve Peacock from Unisys. We're talking virtualization, data center consolidation, cloud, challenges, benefits, and so forth. And when we went to break, we were talking challenges. We didn't have a chance to hear from Steve and Dmitry. So let's start there. Let's start with Dmitry from Quest. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are in this space?
Well, one of the things we're actually seeing right now is the fact that people haven't properly baselined their systems before they made the move. So now when they're getting into performance problems or any SLA issues, they don't have baseline metrics to go back to figure out what went wrong, and more importantly, how wrong is it, right? And how do we get back to that? So there's been a lot of work in refactoring, trying to get up to the same levels whenever someone makes a move, if there's any sort of problem because of those numbers being missing in the first place.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We had that back in the days where we were going to do share and savings things, and people would come in and work out deals between government and industry to share the savings that are achieved from a program. But if you can't baseline the actual cost today, it makes it a moot point to try to figure out what the savings will be. So that's a very good point. Steve, what do you think are some of the biggest challenging areas that need to be overcome to get to where we got to go?
I think we mentioned a lot of the big ones. Sharing, of course, is always is a very huge one. Getting the funding we mentioned, for acquiring like cloud services. But I think if we look at what's going to happen in the next couple of years, we've got a lot of IT transformation that still needs to occur. And so changing the funding model, which is a directive from the OMB, is probably going to be very important. On the commercial side, they're changing direction, they're changing technologies, they're adapting to things that are coming out that are new. The acquisition process for the federal government has got to adapt to that kind of mode if it's going to keep up, if it's going to change that kind of pace. So I think that's going to be one of the big barriers, is being able to actually fund the ongoing and continuing change inside the infrastructure. The other is in the application space, being able to inventory your applications, attribute those applications, determine where they're going to be positioned, or when you're refactoring, whether they're going to go into a dedicated infrastructure, a private cloud, or a public cloud. Being able to fund that, to do that strategically, are going to be key factors for the future.
Very good, thanks. Appreciate those points, very good. Mike Mestrovich, whenever we talk about consolidation, virtualization, cloud, the security question always comes to bear. You know, everyone says, well, what about security? You know, we have all these security requirements and so forth. Are we going to lose control, or how do you address those? How are you looking at that question in order to keep you on track?
Sure. So actually, from our virtualization perspective, we actually see virtualization and data center consolidation as an enhancement to security. Simply from the physical component, if I only have to worry about a smaller number of data centers, well, then my security footprint is reduced to those smaller number of centers. And actually, with the same security dollars, I can focus more intensely on the security that I want to provide to those facilities. So that's one component of it. The other component from a virtualization perspective is a desktop virtualization, something we're actively involved in, and we're rolling out about 12,000 seats of virtualized desktops this year. We're on pace to do that. That's about 25% of our total desktops. And we'll press that forward as the technology matures. But with virtual desktops, I have the opportunity to maintain one gold master image, and then I can go ahead and patch that master image in off hours, and then every time the customer logs back in, they get the new patched version. So from our perspective, and we've seen some great evidence of this with our pilots thus far and with our initial rollout, you know, our ability to patch desktops to make them IAVA compliant has dropped from a matter of weeks to a matter of hours.
Wow.
And so, I mean, that's a major compelling factor. The thing that is difficult to quantify is, you know, mission effectiveness. That means now that I have more people that are more able to accomplish their mission because I haven't incurred downtime by doing patching operations.
Right.
And the team that I have doing patching operations, while their effectiveness is improved because they only have to patch one gold image, that possibly means that staff is freed up to take care of other activities. So we actually see virtualization as a major enhancement for security.
Wow, that's a good way to look at it too. Yeah, as opposed to being a constraint, it's an actual opportunity and a chance to get a handle, probably a better centralized view of what's happening in the organization. Cheryl Rogers, how about over FAA? How do you look at that security question as you're addressing all these new advances?
I absolutely agree with Mike. It's certainly fewer machines. It makes security a lot easier, and also, like, when you're able to move toward a image-based environment, you can implement security controls a lot better. But I'd like to also say that, you know, as you virtualize, you're really adding another layer that you've got to protect. And we already have a lot of layers where we look at security, so it's really important that you engage your information security personnel early on, and we've done that at the FAA. And when you've got to look at this virtual machine setting on a virtual host, and you've got to patch that layer, you've got to monitor and protect that layer. So thinking about that as you move forward in virtualization is a real important thing, and it's worked well for the FAA.
Yeah, good point. I think, you know, adding that layer, we talked earlier about the talent pool. I guess having people to understand all the various nuances with security when you're beginning to, you know, put multiple operating systems on the same platform and things like that causes a lot of different issues in terms of having people to understand all those different things. Gunnar, security from an open source perspective?
Yeah. Again, we've been talking a lot about this virtualization, data center consolidation, and even cloud as a forcing function for improving management of a lot of these systems. And one thing I'm actually very excited about is the SCAP standard, which is the Secure Content Automation Protocol, which actually came out of the FDCC effort a few years ago. What we ended up with was a standard that NIST defined, which allows us to describe a security posture and then go interrogate machines and say, hey, do you meet these requirements?
Right.
That's something you absolutely need if you're going to enforce SLAs in a kind of a cloud environment, but it's also giving us the tools to apply security postures across a broad set of machines in an automated way, whereas before we had to send a person out and by hand go through 400, 500 configuration items. We can actually just automate that process. So having additional tools and standards like that, I think is as Mike said, I agree with him completely. It actually offers us the opportunity for better security than we ever had when we had these little hardware-based islands distributed throughout the organization.
Cool. Those computers are pretty cool.
Yeah, how about it,
all these
right?
different tools coming up. Neat. We got about 12 minutes to go, and I like to always end the show by looking out forward as opposed to the here and now. What's out and what do you see down the road coming? What are the next phases of this? What will the world look like 5 years out, 10 years out, whatever? Let's start with Dmitry over at Quest. Dmitry, what's your view of the future? Where's this all going? What's it going to mean to us? What's it going to mean to the world we live in, so to speak? What's your vision?
So looking at data center consolidation, virtualization, cloud computing, all that, I think what's going to happen is, like you started off, that it's a pendulum swing, that we were centralized, then we got scattered and decentralized, now we're bringing it back in. I think you're going to see another scattering happen, but it'll be a lot more smart this time around, where even though the scattering and the decentralization will probably happen back out to the desktops, you've got machines that are much more powerful than they were even 5-10 years ago. But you're going to offload some of the work that you're doing in the central center back onto the user's environment, but you're going to have much more control of it centrally. I think that's where things are going to start heading to, kind of blending that control and decentralized model with things like desktop virtualization, where everything is still self-contained and managed centrally.
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Cheryl Rogers, FAA, what's your crystal ball look like? What's it look like in your head? What's your picture out several years out there that the world looks like?
Well, I packed my crystal ball with me. Well, I think that the things like cloud computing, data center consolidation, anytime you're moving to an IT shared service environment, I think I think where we're headed is it's going to free the IT community up to really think more strategically and about how IT can really support the business in their strategic direction. We'll spend less time worrying about installing servers and doing server administration and all the nuts and bolts kinds of things. So I'm hoping that within 5 years that we will be kind of shifting to where more of our time, more of our money is spent on the strategic direction of the business. So, and also in the area of desktop virtualization, this is something the FAA is exploring. I think we can get to the point where 5 years from now, if we could have just our employees equipped with end-user computing devices, be it a desktop, laptop, a PDA, whatever, that they can use a variety of devices in a virtual environment wherever they're located and just work much more virtually.
Yeah, very good. There's some great points there. I think you're right, too. I think, we're evolving to where government agencies can focus on what is our mission and service and that we provide and not worry about the IT infrastructure. It'll be there to support it. Steve, Peacock-Unisys, what's the future look like to you when you think about the next 5-10 years and where all this is going?
Well, who would have thought that data center operations would be so exciting, right? when you're changing tapes at 3 a.m. in the morning in your ops center and you're thinking this is a bad career
That's true.
move,
And I
right?
wonder how long ago, it just seems like yesterday the word cloud first entered the picture, and now, now everything's cloud. So, things change quick.
And I think the change is actually going to get much faster. It's going to be all about speed. You see devices like the iPads and the Droids and such that are coming out, and there's going to be a lot of demand. So CIOs and their departments have to be really smart about the moves that they're going to take in the next 5 years. We see the 2015 infrastructure as being very challenging with all these different types of resources where you can put the applications. We've got a lot of applications today that we've got to move, refactor, re-engineer, and we're going to have more applications building at a very rapid pace. So we see something called the hybrid enterprise at Unisys, where you're managing all these resources, and you have to focus on 3 strategies. Looking at applications, how do you attribute them, where should they go, how should they run, should they be divided, should they be consolidated, should they just run with somebody else? Planning your infrastructure, looking at everything, not just the technologies, but the security issues, networking, the operations, and then the management tools are going to be critical, and they're going to be changing so much.
Right.
Managed services out there, sending it out, doing it yourself, the automation is just going to be intense. So we see a future where you've got to do a lot of smart planning, and a lot of adaptability.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's changing. I think the whole industry's changing too in different ways. I mean, there was a time that Amazon sold books only and Google was a search engine. Now they're cloud providers and they're whatever. So yeah, it changes quick. Gunnar Hellekson, what's your future look like? What's it look like to you?
It sounds awfully similar to these other futures, which is actually a really good sign, right? We've got additional transparency and visibility into our infrastructures. We have a lot less friction and a lot less lock-in in each of those services that we're consuming. I think we're also seeing this continuous process of radical commoditization of our infrastructures, right? It's just starting with the hardware, but I think you'll see more and more layers of the IT infrastructure get commoditized and turned into services. And what that actually will enable is a great deal more collaboration between agencies. I think you're going to see it becoming a lot easier for FAA to work together with state on shared projects, and I think that's really exciting. Also, I foresee myself having a jetpack.
Yeah, there you go. I like that too. I want one of them. Mike Mestrovich-DIA, what's when you think long term? When you take off that battling the day-to-day battles and you start thinking about the future and strategies out there, what do you see? What's it look like to you, Mike?
Well, I'd love to have a jetpack, but I'm going to say that I'm going to shoot for something simpler. And the simpler for me is right now we have an environment throughout DoD, not just the intelligence community, where individuals can't go to other locations and log in because they're a CENTCOM user and they go to Transcom. Well, they don't have a Transcom account. Well, at least within the intelligence community, as part of that quad effort, I'd like to fix that so that NGA people can go to DIA and DIA people can go to NSA, and anybody can sit down at any computer in the intelligence space, log in, have access to their data, their files, their email, and be able to collaborate more effectively. We spend a lot of time today setting up collaboration cells and physically bringing in those disparate networks. We need to get away from that, and I think the efforts that we're undertaking today are going to lead us down that path.
Yeah, terrific. Sounds great. Cindy Cassil, let's talk about the future. Let's what you see and some of the things that you see happening down the long run here.
Well, I think as far as government is concerned in data center consolidation, that we're going to see maybe just a few service providers like we did around payroll and HR in the federal government, that we'll have a few data center providers and that the federal government will consolidate eventually down into those few service providers. As far as cloud computing is concerned, I think that we're going to see more maturity around cloud computing contracting, and that I think that right now the vendors really are driving the business rules on that. But I think that the government is going to, step in and say, okay, these are the things that we need to have in order to make it easier for us to go to the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's been brought up. Have the other government, Mike and Cheryl, you seen the same thing with the different models for actually acquiring equipment that need to be defined? Start with Cheryl.
Yes, we're really keeping track with what's happening at the government level. I think that Cindy's right. We will be looking to across government to consolidate to these centers of excellence around a given particular service. And we're real excited about some of the things that we're hearing. Well, actually, some of the things that GSA has already done in moving forward, such as looking at email and other things. So that will be a good thing for government.
Yeah, I like to see performance-based contracting make another big play here. I thought it was a great idea when it was here, and it seemed to drift away. Mike?
Interesting that you bring that up, and we've just awarded a number of different contracts for our IT support, which are performance-based. So our site contract awards are all performance-based.
Well, it fits that model of buying a result as opposed to buying a piece of equipment.
It does. I would say that one of the things that we have seen change ever so slightly, and not fast enough for me, is application procurement items. And when we go to this virtualized cloud, I don't think our application vendors necessarily have developed the licensing schemes to keep up with that service delivery model.
Yeah. Well, a lot of exciting things ahead. Let me take a couple minutes here and try to put together a summary of all this great content. I think we started talking about three things. We talked about increased efficiencies, better capabilities, but oh, by the way, also reduced cost as three things that are sort of drivers here to help move this forward. We talked about the fact that we need speed of services, and we talked about next generations of IT people are going to expect things quick, and by getting to virtualization and consolidation, we'll be able to deliver a lot faster and move a lot quicker. We talked about governance being something that can't be overlooked, that's got to be addressed up front because there's going to be a lot of management issues, business process issues, and things that are going to have to be managed as this change takes place. We also kind of agreed that the evolution is just kind of starting, that once we begin moving, there's probably things we haven't even thought about yet. That are going to happen when we get to the place where some of these capabilities can happen. I just think of the number of apps we have on mobile devices these days, and as we start picturing them coming into the workplace, all the different capabilities that can come along. Something that resonated well with me was this talent pool issue, that as the technology changes and the complexities grow, we need the talent that's able to take advantage of these. And that's going to be a challenge for our universities and government agencies and training programs. The word culture worked its way into the discussion, as it always does. That technology is one thing, but the culture of organizations is a whole different thing. Moving people to different models of doing business is a challenge. Baselining costs to be able to actually measure becomes an issue, so we're actually able to determine where are we and where are we going and are we making progress. And we discussed the fact that security really can be an opportunity, as opposed to viewing security as a constraint. It could be viewed as an opportunity to address some things, perhaps consolidates all the various security products we've been band-aiding out there over the years. So we got some exciting things there. And my sort of summary from listening to you talk about the future is I kind of see like a hybrid world out there down the road where we'll have, kind of a combination of commercial products entering the government workspace, but yet we'll still have some private things and some, things that the government will continue to have to do on its own. So I see this sort of like hybrid world coming about. Before we go, I want to thank a few people. First of all, Federal News Radio, of course, for hosting us. Our sponsors who are here with us today. Our panelists from taking time from your very, very busy schedules to be here and share your thoughts and ideas with us. One thing I love about the show is we all get smarter. We all talk to each other, we all learn new stuff. And of course, finally, our listening audience out there in Radio Land. Thanks all for listening. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.